Hello, Karen here, Soul Symbols Astrology, and I'm here to bring you the weekly astrology from the 2nd of November and through till the 8th of November. So we got a really busy week this week. Some beautiful transits and some very difficult transits. So I shall go through them one by one, day to day, and we'll have a look at how we can work with these transits this week. So the first that we have is Mars at the anaretic degree, 29 degrees of Scorpio, which is making a trine with Neptune at 29 degrees of Pisces. So Neptune is currently retrograde. It has come from Aries and gone into Pisces. So it's redoing, it's reassessing, resetting, reviewing all of its time there in Pisces. It's tying up the loose ends. And there may be a lot of work that Neptune is doing there in this retrograde because it was in Pisces. It ingressed around February, the beginning of February 2012. So it spent approximately 13 years in Pisces. So it's tying up the work that it's done there. So if you want to see what Neptune is doing in its retrograde, it's reviewing, resetting, redoing, just look at that period between the beginning of 2012 until now, and you may get an idea of what Neptune is trying to do in its last part of its journey through Pisces before it ingresses back into Aries. So what is going on between Mars and Neptune? The first thing that springs to mind for me is Mars is that active principle, the principle of action. But this is more of an action like the Wu Wei of the Taoist philosophy. So that quiet inner action that comes with flow, the ebb and flow of consciousness. So it's kind of like a creative quietness. It's that ideal of turning the other cheek. But with Mars and Neptune, we have that spiritual and creative vitality. We can find that action in compassion with Neptune in Pisces, so that active compassion towards others. And this is a trine which is a beautiful aspect. And Mars has not long come off that activation of the grand water trine. This is just a trine to Neptune. I'll post the video of Mars activating the grand water trine for some more context for you. So this might be the time to go back to or deepen your meditative practice. Very supported for that, Mars here, activating Neptune in Pisces. You could also look at doing acts of compassion towards people, those in your neighborhood, your family, to think about how you can actively give compassion. It could be charitable endeavors. It could be taking your next door neighbor a meal because they've had a difficult illness or a difficult situation. So it is that compassion. So you can open to that compassion and the enlightened non-action. So as I said, the meditation, but it can be a deep contemplation. We have Saturn within a few degrees of Neptune. It's co-present there in Pisces, and Saturn does bring that structure to contemplate. So contemplating our emotional lives, our actions, the way we are in the world, any form of contemplation during this short window of time with Mars trine Neptune will be a good thing to do. But we also need to remember with Mars, with any of the planets, there can be that shadow side. So we could have feelings of futility, a sense of pointlessness. But it's also that potential for secret harmful actions, or we can brush over our desires. We can redirect our desires with this. We can camouflage what we really want. So we need to be aware of these, and particularly so because the following day, Mars is going to ingress into Sagittarius on the 4th of November and immediately come into an opposition with Uranus. For that archetypal energy of Mars and Uranus, with Uranus there at 0 degrees, it's retrograde in Gemini, and very shortly to retrograde back into Taurus, where it was for 7 years. Those feelings that you may have had, the more shadowy feelings of restlessness, of a sense of pointlessness, can then work out with Uranus to these huge urges for freedom, independence, which are not bad things, but it can be an excessive self-will. So recklessness, Mars and Uranus can bring that flash of recklessness, rash actions, and anger. So we need to look at this Mars Neptune in light of the following day, it going into that opposition with Uranus, where things can blow up sudden. Uranus is sudden and unexpected change, and we can't predict, in a sense, with Uranus. That's the surprise of Uranus. But we can know that we may be going into that transit the following day with that sense of pointlessness, that sense of futility about what we're doing, or with our relationship. It does depend what houses these are situated in. But it's a time to be very careful about the actions we're going to take. It's wonderful, Mars and Uranus, for that sudden breakthrough, that misses of energy that Mars and Uranus bring, that it's that young, that masculine push out energy. So we're going from that inner action, that meditative action, to that outward action very suddenly. And you may sense this huge change of energetics with Mars coming into opposition with Uranus. But we can push through on things that we have been mulling over if we've been using the Neptune and Mars trine. And there's been flow there with our meditation, looking at our dreams, our desires, what we want to do. This can be the moment where we get the energetics to push forward. But it needs to be measured. We need to be measured, and we need to be aware of rash action, impulsivity, which could get us into trouble here. That's Mars is in Sagittarius and will be there until the 14th of December. So we had plenty of time to take that drive and apply it to our visions. Sagittarius, very much about the big picture. It's ruled by Jupiter. So we have that wonderful opportunity to look at our long-term visions, to look at higher learning, to look at philosophy, to have a look at the things that we want to bring into this world, that we want to work with. But we could, having had any sense of futility or pointlessness, and then that sudden change of energy into outward drive, as I say, make rash decisions. So I would advise that sitting with the energy, noticing the energy and the changes there, and contemplating those things. How do we want to move visions forward? How do we want to move forward in our own lives and in relation to other people? And Mars is the ruler of the sun in Scorpio, of the full moon that is coming in. It's a full moon in Taurus on the 5th of November. So this full moon in Taurus is ruled by that Mars, which will still be sitting in opposition to Uranus. Quite the thing for Mars to be ruling the sun. So we need to be looking at those martial themes of this full moon. And then we have the moon, which is in its exaltation. It's extremely happy here, and it's ruled by Venus, which at the time of the full moon is sitting in its dignity in Libra. But the following day, on the 6th of November, Venus will be moving into Scorpio. So that illumination of the moon that is ruled by Venus will have a Venus that then suddenly loses its dignity, because it's in its detriment, its opposite, its home sign in Scorpio. But we will have time to have a look at what's being illumined in Taurus there, issues of stability, of luxury, of beauty. Taurus is the fixed earth sign. So where do we need to ground? Are we having illumined our levels of ungroundedness, or do we need to curb excesses of luxury and indulgence? It can bring this, but also it can highlight where we need more of that, where we need to ground in, where we allow ourselves to enjoy the beauty and the luxury and the fruits of all the things that we work hard at. This can be apparent at this full moon. But Venus on the 6th, ingressing into Scorpio, will immediately come into a square with Pluto in Aquarius. That is a difficult aspect for Venus, but Pluto is Lord of the underworld. He's digging down, he's bringing things up. So we may have things come to light, secrets, the more undesirable aspects of people in relationships we may see, or we may see those in us. Pluto will be all about dredging those dark, deep things. And with Venus in Scorpio, that is about depth. It can bring out dark truths. We may see that in our lives around, or the people around us, but we may see that out in the world as well. So all those dark truths that we're awaiting to be uncovered, this may be happening around this time, at 6th, 7th. It's still in square right up to the 9th, 10th of November. So keep your eyes peeled for things that come out. Venus can also bring about those themes. Square Pluto in Aquarius can bring out those things of control and power. Obsession. So these are areas to look at, the dynamics of power within your relationships. There can be adjustments made here. Pluto will highlight this. Pluto will bring the unconscious to consciousness in terms of power dynamics, control, any obsession. And of course, Venus will then go on later in November to become part of that grand water trine. So anything that comes up, I think that's about the 25th of November. So the next few weeks, as Venus is traveling through Scorpio, anything that emerges, anything that Pluto has dredged up or Venus brings, Venus can be very spicy here in Scorpio. There can be an element of spice to our relationships. But if there's anything that requires healing, we've got a couple of weeks before Venus activates that grand trine, and of course that grand water trine, and of course there'll be ease and flow, and I believe there'll be deep healing of relationships. So if we have had unexpected happenings in terms of Mars opposing Uranus, or we have any deep dark secrets or the unconscious things becoming conscious, by the 25th, the end of November, that there's an opportunity for healing and flow and ease in those areas. And then to finish the week off, on the 8th of November, which is a Saturday, Uranus will ingress in retrograde back into Taurus, and it will immediately make a sextile to Neptune in Pisces. So a sextile is a lovely aspect, but it's going to bring those, or it can bring revolutionary changes to our consciousness. And of course, Uranus is there to review its time in Taurus, which is 7 years, I believe it was in there. So it's reviewing, it's tying up those loose ends while it's there. But with Neptune, we might get that sudden flash, moments of epiphany with Uranus in that sextile. We can have that rebirth of vision or sudden flashes of inspiration, and also a sense of this cosmic unity. Neptune can bring that sense of oneness, of unity there, and transcendence. And again, we have that beautiful aspect of deep compassion there, and we can turn that towards ourselves, but to others, or for situations out in the world. But we also need to be aware that Neptune Uranus can bring that shadow side of escapism, fantasy. So we do have the benefit of Saturn being co-present with Neptune, which I think is grounding us, is giving us that sense of reality of how we can embody those inspirations, those flashes of vision, that excitement. But it can be, it can be a fantasy, so, and wishful thinking. So we do need to have that discernment about how we bed those things into realities. And we will have time, because Uranus will be retrograding for some time. I think it re-enters Gemini in April 2026, but it's there for several months, so we can work with that. We don't need to knee-jerk react to that. And of course, Mars, now in Sagittarius, is moving into a conjunction with Mercury, and Mercury will be stationing retrograde next Sunday on the 9th. So I'll deal with that next week. I'll speak about that next week. Mercury is going to make a really interesting trip here, going back into Scorpio. And I believe the new moon is conjunct Mercury. So Mercury will be in Cazimi in that new moon in Scorpio later on in the month, towards the end of November. So we've got quite a powerful week with Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Mars, the full moon, and Venus. So lots of material to work with, something going on almost every day this week, rather large transits. Take care of yourself, ground yourself this week, work with what's there, journal, look at what's going on around you, within you, but also look out there in the world. There could be very surprising revelations coming this week out in the world, but we could also see acts of extremism with that Uranus and Neptune. There could be acts of extremism there, and with the Mars opposition to Uranus earlier in the week, it can bring that aggression out there in the world. Powerful energies, people, this week, and very busy, extremely busy this week. Just stay grounded, everyone, and watch, observe. If you take that witness energy and that is active, that active compassion, have that active quietness by contemplating what's going on around you, by having the time to look at how you are within all of this energetic that is going on this week, but also how you can move forward with your visions, with your any epiphanies you may have, any breakthroughs you may have. So strap on in, everyone, and enjoy the ride this week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.